stop the car, and I was kind of panicking.
Shocked and outraged, parents and teachers have a message for the province. Don't add more kids to already crowded classes. Now, the Ford government is considering removing caps on primary class sizes. That's kindergarten to grade 3. The unions representing teachers are furious. It's even up for discussion, but the government is looking to save dollars right across the board. Chris Glover joins us live now. Chris, the government has put out a document to guide these consultations. So what's in that document?
Well, basically, it says that achieving class size caps has been difficult for the boards to manage, and it's been expensive as well. But many education stakeholders say the government better do its homework and learn just how important smaller classes are for education. At this kids' activity center, the rule for 4-year-olds is 8 kids for every 1 adult. Jennifer LeGros can't believe the current cap for kindergarten is 29 kids per class.
Like surprising to me. I didn't realize that class sizes were that big.
Already to begin with.
Already to begin with, yeah. So I can't even imagine what it could be like when he goes in a couple years.
Even more shocking for her and the other parents here, class size caps for kindergarten and grades 1 to 3 could soon be gone.
I think there should be more teachers teaching, not less, and then adding more kids. That just sounds chaotic to me. That's what it sounds like to me, chaos.
It's way too many children per teacher. And I'm from Germany, and their class sizes are much smaller, and I'm hesitating to put my kids to the system because I just think it's way too many kids.
The class size conversation will investigate what could replace caps.
To me, that's just irresponsible and unsafe.
The Elementary Teachers Union fears going back to a system of averages when it comes to classrooms.
You've got a classroom of 32 and a classroom of 20 with class averages. We know averages don't work, and that's why negotiations occurred to put caps in place in the first place. So we don't want confusion, we want consistency, and we want equity in our schools in Ontario.
This consultation comes as the PC government is trying to trim an overall deficit it pegs at more than $14 billion.
I want to hear from our education partners and how they feel about that, and we'll land at that final point together.
I think it's really appalling that the government would consider that students, that our children, are the ones that are going to bear the cost of their cuts.
But he's so happy you could have 50 of him in a classroom.
Yeah. I wouldn't want that.
Joking aside, Jennifer LeGros wants her government to know she's now doing her homework on the consultations.
These are our future, these are our kids, and we probably shouldn't mess with that. There's other pockets that they can kind of pick from.
The consultation document also points out educator staffing makes up roughly 80% of the government funding that school boards receive. But the education minister says right now she's just listening and no decision has been made yet.
Thank you, Chris. So what could changing the class size cap mean for students? Coming up, I talked to a professor from OISE who has studied Ontario class sizes. We'll have that for you in about 20 minutes.
Commuter chaos this morning, followed by big discussions about the TTC's budget and a possible fare hike for riders. I'll have the details coming up from City Hall.
My daughter, she cried out, there's water in the house. By the time she cried, the water reached here. And she was wondering what to do, but the door couldn't open. Then the door just pushed open, burst open. So that's how she get out. And my grandkids were in the other room. They were trapped in the other room.
A narrow escape, and a family loses everything after water from a broken pipe rushed into their home, flooding their Etobicoke apartment. The family's escape is remarkable, Toronto Fire saying if it wasn't for their quick thinking, they could have been electrocuted. Ali Chiasson joins us live now from that apartment on Dixon. And Ali, we often see broken pipes with the fluctuation in temperatures, but who could have predicted anything like this?
Absolutely. I mean, there is a unique set of circumstances at play here. When this water main broke, it flooded this entire area and sent water all over around this building here, and water started rushing into basement apartments. The Gilberts say they're lucky to be alive.
Split of a second. We didn't know what to do.
Opal Gilbert woke up to a nightmare.
My daughter, she wake up in 2 o'clock in the morning. She cried out, there's water in the house.
I woke up at 2 o'clock to use the washroom, but when I woke up, that's what I saw.
Water from a broken water main outside had been pouring into her bedroom window.
It was cold. The water was right here when I woke up.
She scrambled to unplug lamps, anything electrical, while she still could.
Then it came up. Yeah, so it was like a lot of water, and it's crazy.
She screamed to the others to get the kids and get out.
My kids, they're this small, right? If I should have put them outside, they would have drowned.
Eventually, the door burst open.
Never seen anything like this before. I was just running up and down what to do. The first thing I did was plug out the electrical stuff because I'm like, if I step in the water with the electrical stuff, I might die.
The grandmother, daughters, and grandkids all managed to escape through another window.
They're very lucky. Initially, there was just 2 units responding, but when they saw the magnitude of the flood, we had a full response. When we arrived, we couldn't even open the door because the water level was so high in the apartment that the pressure was keeping the door closed.
They are so traumatized right now. My grandkids are just crying. I see my kids' life in front of me just taken away from me.
They said the water main broke.
We've had numerous calls like this across the city with rising and lowering temperatures. It's, thawing ice.
It's just unfair. Life.
As you can see, the repair work is still underway. I am told that the super of this building has found another apartment inside there for the Gilberts to stay in the meantime. Send it back to you, Dwight.
Well, sad situation for that family. Thank you, Ali. And residents at 260 Wellesley still don't know when they'll get power. Just this past hour, the city was there handing out about 2,000 blankets at the building to help residents stay warm. The problem started Tuesday night after a pipe burst in the basement. Water seeped into the 33-story apartment's electrical room, leaving residents without power, heat, or water for more than 24 hours. Toronto Fire is still on site monitoring the situation. And incredible video from Mississauga where a powerful explosion injured 4 workers this morning. What led to the violent blast? Still ahead. And it was a chaotic and messy morning for commuters as they crammed into stations trying to get onto already jam-packed subways. The same-day transit riders face major delays on their morning commute. The TTC board is voting on a possible fare hike for them. And as City Hall reporter Lauren Pelly explains, it's all tied to a big budget crunch.
Crowded subway platforms and chaos for commuters. Many wound up stuck on long bus rides.
It took me about 2.5 hours to get to work. It usually takes me about 15 minutes from Yonge and Eglinton.
It's an inconvenience, but sometimes it happens.
One councillor even said she'd be late for the TTC board meeting because of delays on Line 1.
You tweeted today that you were actually running late, being stuck on the TTC, and then you guys are going to be talking about fare increases for riders. What does that even feel like for you?
Well, it doesn't feel good. None of us feels particularly good about it. But what's important is that if we have to do that to balance the budget, that the budget is accountable and that we're really ready to say that you will see an improvement in service.
Another fare increase is unacceptable, and
this transit advocate says it doesn't make sense to riders.
And we've been seeing all over social media the anger that people feel about the delays, and having another fare increase without any improvements to service and without any investments that we need to even maintain our system as it is.
This report,
as the board heard today, it's clear more money is needed. New numbers from the TTC show it requires nearly $34 billion over the next decade and a half just to function. Roughly 2/3 of that is unfunded.
We have to continue to invest in the TTC, and I'm not actually very thrilled by the idea of a fare increase. I don't think anybody's really that excited about it, but what we've been told is for the 2019 year to complete the budget, we need to look at that.
So what are the other options for funding transit? Some argue raising property taxes would help, but the mayor doesn't support a hike above the rate of inflation.
And the reason I said a inflationary property tax increase as opposed to zero was because I recognize and respect the fact that the city has inflationary pressures that are on them in terms of people's wages and other kinds of things, and the same is true of the TTC.
Others say Premier Doug Ford's government needs to inject more cash amid the province's plans to take over Toronto's subway system.
And if the province steals the subway, delays and overcrowding are going to become the norm. We need the province and the city to fund the TTC and make the investments we need.
If not, frustrated riders could be the ones who keep footing the bill. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
The Toronto Police Services Board also met today, and the public topic on the table was increasing the budget in order to hire hundreds more uniformed officers.
I think that most of the people of Toronto, in fact, I would say the vast majority, will strongly support the fact that we are going to put more people on the street, hire more police officers, hire more special constables, put more resources into the hands of the police.
The board approved a $30 million increase today, and now it's up to City Council to finalize it. With the money, 300 more uniformed officers would be hired. That's on top of the 200 hired last year. There would also be 122 positions filled by lesser paid special constables. They would take over 4 officers in non-emergency situations like noise complaints or directing traffic. An explosion in Mississauga this morning sent 4 people to hospital. Investigators are trying to figure out what caused the blast inside the shipping container. Linda Ward has the details.
The exact moment of the explosion captured on surveillance cameras. A propane tank inside that steel storage container blew up around 7 this morning as the manager of the car dealership next door arrived for work.
Flames came out shooting with it and the whole thing buckled open.
4 men were sent flying from the blast.
There was a person on fire, clothes blew off of him, and he managed to remove we believe it was his pants, and threw it over the fence.
The steel roof of the storage container bowed from the force, a force that shook the entire neighborhood.
You can actually feel it. It actually moved our bay doors. That's how powerful it was.
Peel police say the men were fixing the roof of this plaza and had just arrived to start their shift when the explosion happened. Those 4 were rushed to hospital with serious burns. The 5th worker came by the scene today.
You guys are doing the work on the roof over here? Yeah. Sorry that happened to you. The 5th guy who was there, was that you or is there another guy outside? It's me. Okay, yeah. So there was 5 of you, the 4 guys who went to the hospital and you were in the washroom.
Yep.
Lucky.
Yes.
Lucky time to make a washroom break. Police don't think there's anything suspicious about the blast, but the Ministry of Labour and the Fire Marshal are now investigating just how this makeshift tool shed became a powder keg. Linda Ward, CBC News, Mississauga.
It looked like a slick jacket, and good news, it was on sale online. But for this Toronto man, what he actually got, you got to see to believe. That story coming up. Colette, nobody would believe the fluctuations we've been having in this weather recently, the ups and the downs, and where are we going next?
Yeah, yesterday up with the temperature, and unfortunately now we're headed down. It's time to welcome back in Arctic air. Whether or not we think it's welcome, it's coming back in. So -2 at the moment, mild out there for now. -3 in Markham, Oshawa at -3. Factor in the winds. They're not too strong. They will be strengthening over the next 24 hours. It feels like -8. That's your wind chill. So the winds, for the most part, you see are coming from the west to northwest. You see it's a little off here in Toronto, but essentially, and they're not all that strong, but they'll be getting stronger. The gusts, having a look at the forecast for these through the overnight hours, they'll be building first from St. Catharines around towards Hamilton, getting much stronger than this, coming up there in the 40s, over 40 kilometers an hour, eventually likely over 50 kilometers an hour, and that's through the day on Friday until we get well into Friday night before the gusts start to move out and we see them dropping back and dropping out altogether. For now, a little bit of light snow, just some flurry activity we've been seeing out there. There's really not much to it, But there'll be much more to it when those winds pick up tomorrow in the areas in yellow here where of the snow squall watch. Some of these areas, because of those squalls, could pick up 15 to 25 centimeters. I know that is away from the GTA. We'll likely just see some flurries off of this, but I want you to know about it because we have so many travelers with it being Friday and into the weekend. Overnight tonight, -8, feeling like -15, but look at the temperature. It barely climbs tomorrow afternoon. That's our high of -6. With those winds, it's going to feel much colder than that, and the cold air sticks around for the weekend. I'll have that forecast coming up, Dwight.
Thanks, Colette.
No problem.
Imagine how many people are being taken advantage of by companies like this that are really, spending money and spending good money and getting quality like this that they can't even wear.
It's a warning for online shoppers. What you see isn't always what you get. The proof that some deals are too good to be true, coming up next.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
You've probably seen those annoying ads on your social media feeds offering great deals on seemingly great products. Well, like anything else, it's buyer beware. And as our Greg Ross found out, sometimes it's even worse than you could imagine.
Thomas Hargitay says lately his social media pages have been flooded with advertisements offering great deals.
I saw this ad on Instagram and I thought,
I thought, okay, well, let's see what it's about. Everybody.
An ad for a men's overcoat, which looked too good to be true. It was on sale for only $39.98.
I thought, hey, you know what? For that price, let's see what we're gonna get, right? Okay.
So this is the jacket that they sent you?
This is the jacket that they sent.
He says he went in with low expectations, but this jacket didn't even meet those.
If I actually bend my arms, the lining starts to rip on the inside.
Don't wreck the jacket.
No. And you can clearly see the lapel pocket is just a strip of material that's being sewn on.
We took it to one of Toronto's leading men's clothiers to see if this jacket is actually as bad as it seems.
It's abomination.
Turns out it is.
Obviously, one, the fabric is horrible, and then two, these details are done very sloppily. And then obviously, whoever's making it doesn't potentially have that much knowledge of like what modern menswear is. They wouldn't pick these buttons. And
there's nothing I could do that would get you to try this on.
No, there's absolutely nothing.
Hargitay has looked into returning the jacket, but says it's proving to be more of a headache than it's worth. He can afford to eat the cost, but what about people who can't?
Imagine how many people are being taken advantage of by companies like this.
This online retail expert says it's pretty common.
We see these websites popping up more and more. Products are sourced from various places, as I said, so the retailer never actually knows what they're getting. In some cases, they could just take a photo of what they'd like to sell and then source photos from somewhere else.
She says it's always a good idea to look for reviews for the product you are purchasing, but they can't always be trusted either.
Quality good. Shipped very good quality.
The website Hargitay bought his jacket from had 33 glowing reviews.
It's a little bit robotic, it's a little bit generic. It's not really giving any information or any real tips about the actual product itself.
So it's almost an indication that those are fabricated.
That's right. A great thing to do is to just do a quick Google search of the company name with something like problem or bad to generate the right SEO results for what you're looking for.
Stephen says it's always better to buy from reputable companies and to make sure to review their return policies. As for Hargitay, he says he's going to make the best of his new jacket.
Wow.
I'm going to wear this out this weekend, Greg.
You're going to wear that out this weekend?
I'm going to wear this out this weekend.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Still ahead, another buyer beware story in that if you buy this Group of 7 painting, beware, it would be a crime. It's been stolen from a home in the city. Just how much it's worth coming up. The political crisis engulfing Venezuela looks no closer to resolving itself. If anything, the uncertainty over who is in charge may have only increased.
Bueno, alerto al pueblo de Venezuela que se está llevando.
The country's defense minister warned today that a coup is underway and through his support behind President Nicolas Maduro. He also denounced Juan Guaido, the opposition leader who yesterday declared himself president. In Washington, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo urged the rest of Latin America to recognize Guaido as president. Here at home, the Trudeau government, too, has thrown its backing behind Guaido, but not everyone in Canada agrees with that move. Julie Van Dusen is following developments for us from Ottawa. So, Julie, where exactly does Canada stand?
Well, the Trudeau government, the opposition parties have all been watching these very dramatic developments. And the Trudeau government for weeks now, of course, has been calling the Maduro government a dictatorship, saying it's there. It's not there in a legitimate fashion and that it should give up power. So with yesterday's developments, it was not a huge surprise that Canada, with other countries, including the U.S., supported Juan Guaido, the 35-year-old president of the National Assembly, who yesterday declared himself president of Venezuela. Canada believes he is committed to lead Venezuela to free and fair presidential elections, according to the Foreign Affairs Minister. Now, the federal Conservatives are pretty well on the same side. They've been denouncing Maduro for a long time, saying he's plunged his country into economic crisis. The NDP aren't quite as willing to embrace the interim president. They say the UN should be weighing in on this matter. Jagmeet Singh, Dwight, put out a statement not too long ago saying Canada should not simply follow the U.S.'s foreign policy, particularly given its history and self-interested interference in the region. Anyway, let's go back to Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland on her most recent comments at a Davos yesterday.
We recognize and express our full support for the interim presidency of Venezuela assumed by the President of the National Assembly, Juan Guaido, in compliance with the Constitution of Venezuela.
Okay, then, so what are the next steps then for Canada in all of this?
Well, it's all about humanitarian aid right now, and Canada and other countries have been trying to get aid into Venezuela for some time. It's been difficult under Maduro. They don't have adequate medicine, food. People have lost jobs. More than 2 million people have actually fled the country. Canada has provided since 2017 really not a lot of aid when you think of the dire circumstances there, $6.2 million, which has flowed through humanitarian groups, but it has been very difficult. Let's take a listen to Canada's former ambassador in the region.
Canada should be part of that planning to deliver humanitarian assistance. We have been ready for years and years. The government of Venezuela has turned away food, even as its population starves, has turned away medication. So as soon as that changes, we should already have that kind of logistical effort planned out and ready to roll. There's also going to be a requirement for longer-term economic support.
So, Dwight, Canada and many of its Latin American allies have agreed to meet in Canada to discuss the next steps on Venezuela. That meeting is expected to take place sometime in February or March.
Julie Van Dusen joining us from our Parliamentary Bureau in Ottawa tonight. Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
It's a controversial newspaper that glorifies Hitler and villainizes feminists, and it circulates across the city of Toronto. I'm Farah Morali, and coming up, I'll have more on the conviction of 2 men behind your ward news.
Earlier, we told you about a change that could be coming to primary schools in the province, with the Ford government considering taking off cap sizes on classes for kindergarten to grade 3. With those class size caps on the chopping block, what could more kids in a single classroom mean for young learners and their teachers? Nina Bassia studies education policy at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. I met with her today to hear what her research on class sizes tells us about what is at stake.
Removing the cap means that there could be a larger number of kids in classes, and it would mean that kids don't get the kind of individualized attention and small group attention from teachers. They don't get a chance to develop the kinds of interpersonal relationships with other kids that support social development.
Is there then a perfect number? Is it 20? Is it 24? Is it 30? Is there a perfect balance then in a classroom?
There is a ton of research on class size, and the research says different things, and I don't think there is a perfect number. I think smaller classes are better for kids, and they're better for teachers as well.
Talk about how the teacher's job would change then with the larger class sizes.
Teachers' jobs will become more frustrating and less satisfying because they won't have the opportunity to really pay attention to their students. They'll have a lot more preparation to do without having the opportunity to really think about who their kids are.
And is it a guarantee that the classes would balloon if this cap is removed?
There's no other reason to remove the cap.
But to raise the number.
But to raise the number, there can be more students per classroom, and the government can save money on hiring teachers. So another consequence for teachers is that some teachers will lose their jobs.
You studied the Liberal government's size reduction decades ago. Yes. What changes did you see from that study?
I saw students and their parents being quite satisfied and excited with their educational experience, and I saw teachers much more engaged and feeling much more effective in their work.
Let's talk about split classes. My kids, as they went through school, they had 4, 5, 5, 6. Yeah. What do you think about split classes as a way to deal with some of the size issues?
Well, every grade has its own curriculum, and if you have a split, or what's called, the government likes to call them combined classes, then the teacher essentially has to manage 2 curricula. And when that's the case, if a teacher isn't incredibly skillful, it makes a difference, particularly in some grade areas. It's not a great experience for kids, and again, it is wear and tear on the teacher.
Lisa Thompson, the education minister, is asking for input from educators like yourself. What is your message to them as they contemplate this?
My message is that smaller classes are good for kids. They're directly good for kids in terms of their classroom experience, and they're good for kids because their teachers are able to teach more effectively.
And as a society, then, do we have to make a choice as how much money, because as you said, they're trying to save money here. Do we have to make a choice between the quality of education our kids get and the amount of money our governments put into our educational system?
That's exactly right.
That's the future.
That's it.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. If a couple of business days is just too long to get your pot, you could soon be in luck. The Ontario Cannabis Retail Corporation has put out a call to businesses who can offer same-day delivery. Right now, delivery is handled only by Canada Post at a flat fee of $5. Same-day delivery would launch around the beginning of March, starting in the GTA. It's not known how much same-day pot would cost customers. To qualify for the contract, companies will have to give evidence of background checks on their delivery staff and keep an electronic record proving the delivery was made to an adult. There was a major art theft in Toronto. A group of 7 painting has been stolen during a break and enter at a home in the annex last week. A.Y. Jackson's Sun Gleams Autumn, North Saskatchewan, is valued at more than $200,000. The theft happened on Friday. The original painting measures 32 by 40 inches. other items from the home also stolen, but not as expensive. Anyone who knows where this piece of Canadian art history is asked to get in contact with police. One person is dead and another in hospital after a stabbing near Jane and St. Clair this morning. Police were called to this home on Mould Avenue early this morning. They arrived and discovered the body of a woman. She was pronounced dead on scene. A man was transported to hospital with serious injuries. Two men behind a controversial Toronto newspaper have been convicted of promoting hatred against women and Jews. James Sears and Leroy Saint-Germain run the paper Your Ward News, and even with the conviction, the pair says they have no plans on stopping the presses. Farah Morelli now with their vow to keep on publishing.
Outside of provincial court today, a victory declared by opponents to a controversial Toronto paper.
He said this was unrelenting, unmitigated hatred. It took him 2 minutes to say guilty. And it's about time, and it's the type of verdict I think that Canadians are going to rejoice in.
So you need to look at all of Your Ward News to see how homophobic and anti-Semitic and racist and misogynistic it is.
Today, an Ontario court judge found James Sears and Leroy Saint-Germain guilty of willfully promoting the hatred of Jews and women.
The judge clearly laid that out today, that misogyny will not be tolerated. I am so pleased.
The controversial paper started showing up on East Toronto doorsteps. It's included content that promotes the legalization of rape and the glorification of Nazis. The federal government has barred Canada Post from distributing it. In the judgment, Justice Richard Bloom said both men were fully aware of the unrelenting promotion of hate in Your Ward News. Hatred of Jews and women was overwhelmingly the message. He even cited the Toronto van attack as an example of the dangers of hate speech, saying the preeminent concern that hate propaganda could contribute to violence is starkly relevant today. Sears compared himself to Jesus today and said he has plans to challenge the decision.
This is the legal system in Canada. I'm a proud Canadian. I respect the legal system, and we're going to appeal.
Though the judge found that the paper is actively promoting the hatred of women and Jews, there was no order for it to stop publishing. The paper has an estimated circulation of about 300,000 in the city of Toronto and remains online.
The judge, he in this case, he is not in a position to make any assessment about what might happen in the future.
This legal expert in freedom of expression says criminal law punishes for past behavior, meaning the judge in this case doesn't have the direct power to stop the paper from printing.
If they continue their behavior, a new prosecution can be brought, and they would be at risk of a more serious penalty as a consequence of that. So it would be a pretty serious risk if they were to continue this behavior that was determined to be unlawful.
Despite that, the pair says they have no plans to change what they do.
So just to be clear, it doesn't sound like you're going to be changing anything about the publication.
Do I look like the type of guy who changes anything about anything? No.
They're slated to be sentenced in April. Farah Morelli, CBC News, Toronto.
The Ontario Science Centre is as old as the atomic number 410. For all the non-scientists out there, that's 50 years old.
The Ontario Science Centre is a place where visions of the future come alive.
I think the most unique feature is that there is a high degree of participation.
Coming up, we take a walk down memory lane, how the institution at Don Mills in Eglinton has endured over the last 5 decades. We have an update to the arrest of Canadian Robert Schellenberg. A Chinese court recently increased his punishment in a drug smuggling case from prison time to the death penalty. This morning, Schellenberg's lawyer told CBC News an appeal will be launched this Sunday, one day before the time runs out to contest his death sentence. Sasha Petrusik has more now from Beijing.
A phone interview today with the CBC. His lawyer, Zhang Dongshou, says he's remained calm since receiving the verdict. He says Schellenberg met with Canadian consular officials 2 days ago. Now, Schellenberg was convicted after an unusually quick retrial last week, and he was sentenced much more severely than he was the first time around. That time it was 15 years in prison. Now it's a death sentence. Observers say the Chinese government is trying to make an example of Schellenberg. It's trying to pressure Canada into releasing Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei executive who was arrested in Vancouver, still being held there on an extradition request from Washington. Now, his lawyer says that we disagree with the verdict, of course. We don't believe there is enough evidence to justify the sentence, even if everything the prosecution presented were true. Now, this appeal could take many, many months, and if it is rejected, it still has to go to the top court here in China, here in Beijing, for its approval. This case is far from over. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Beijing.
A Canadian-led group has put out an urgent call to action to help the rapidly growing number of displaced people worldwide. 68.5 million people are listed as forcibly displaced as of June 2018. That's more than the number displaced by the Second World War. The World Refugee Council wants a major overhaul of the system that's meant to protect refugees. It wants to create a new independent body called the Global Action Network, which would hold nations and leaders accountable if they violate international law, and raise money to help refugees by confiscating assets from corrupt or violent regimes and warlords. The latest hopes to end the longest government shutdown in U.S. history came to an abrupt end this afternoon when two bills failed to win enough votes to pass the Senate. Ellen Morrow has the latest now for us from Washington.
It's no surprise that both of the bills failed in the Senate today. The one put forward by the Republicans included funding for President Trump's border wall with Mexico. The one put forward by the Democrats did not. And the division over the border wall issue is the crux of this crisis, and any kind of compromise appears extremely far off. All the two sides can agree on is the ongoing shutdown is the other side's fault.
The bill that President Trump has put together can't pass the House and can't pass the Senate. So it has no chance of passing.
The Democratic leader's dead-end proposal that stands no chance of earning the president's signature.
So where do we go from here? Well, even though the votes failed, they do provide a potential starting point for further negotiations and could put pressure on more moderate lawmakers to come together and try to find some middle ground. But any middle ground that will please both Democrats and President Trump is extremely elusive. All the while, nearly 1 million Americans will not receive a second paycheck this week, forcing many of them to rely on food banks to make difficult choices about how to spend their savings as they wait for even the smallest sign of progress or compromise on Capitol Hill and in the White House. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. Stay with us. We will be right back. If you grew up in the GTA, at some point you probably went on a field trip with your school to the Ontario Science Centre. The well-loved institution turns 50 this year, and the birthday celebrations kicked off today. To honor the Science Centre, we're giving you a special look back at opening day half a century ago.
Ontario Science Centre. On opening day, it looks as if it has everything going for it. The Ontario government is so proud of the whole thing. They're having not one, but 3 official openings. The building has already won a design award, and society women are rushing to book the Great Hall for their parties.
When the Ontario government first thought of this, then it was just an idea. But that's the power of vision. When you have an idea that has that kind of power, then it can go through time, and with the benefit of hindsight, we can see that it was a fantastic vision. So our responsibility now is to continue feeding that vision, because it's something that is even more important today than it was 50 years ago, because science and technology is such a big part of our lives.
And I think the most unique feature is that there is a high degree of participation. Things that you work yourself, which may tantalize you or tease you or puzzle you, illustrating various scientific principles that are involved in our everyday lives.
This is Curious Spot, our first robot we ever made. We made it at the Ontario Science Centre at the NASA Space Apps. Basically, it avoids obstacles using these obstacle detectors, and it gets the temperature using this one. And then it's able to use a small transmitter to relay this information back to my laptop.
We believe that the educational process is much more effective if it involves a little bit of enjoyment.
It's a homework planner for people who forget that they have homework, and it'll beep to remind you what time you have it. I'm making a decoder, so if people were to plan something and they didn't want someone to know, they would use this.
The Ontario Science Centre is a place where visions of the future come alive, where anyone can be taken in by the wonder of innovation, and where everyone can have fun.
Well, I don't have a favorite exhibit. I just like looking at all the exhibits.
They're all amazing.
Yeah, I would like to be an astronaut. Happy birthday,
Maybe a few young meteorologists in that group there, Colette. Now, you must have been good at science at school.
Well, I hope so. I mean, it got me here, so
Right?
I guess so. I certainly like the subject. I love that piece, too. The static ball, like that was always a favorite.
I love the Science Center. Spent a lot of time there as a kid and also with my kids as an adult. So it's a great spot in our town.
Yeah, it's generational. That is so cool. And, you know, it's from all over Ontario, because I grew up in the Kingston area, and we traveled up. We took field trips to come up to go to the Science Center. By the way, that static ball, you know how that works? It gives a positive charge to your entire body, but your hair as well. And positive charges repel. You need a positive and a negative. So your own head actually repels your hair and doesn't want it anywhere near you.
I love it.
That's how that works. I feel like I'm having those days sometimes anyway, without the static ball. But let's talk about this science, the science of meteorology, and the flurries that we're seeing. Just some light stuff for the most part that's been setting up here and showing on the radar. But much more will set up as the winds get stronger and we go through the day on Friday. So snow squall watch in place. And because it is Friday, heading into the weekend, if you're going to be traveling up the 400, headed up towards areas like Muskoka and beyond, just keep in mind there'll be some of these streamers that are going to be coming so close that we'll even see some scattered flurries into the city and parts of the GTA. But in the more significant areas, it will be 15 to 25 centimeters possible, because they may just be nearly stationary at times. So some significant snow and squalls there as the winds pick up tomorrow. For now, the temperatures aren't so bad. This has been our transitional day, taking us back to the cold air. It's -2. It feels like -8, but the temperature is going to keep going down and the wind's getting stronger, so wind chills become more of a factor. Here you go into tomorrow, see in the early morning hours, and then especially into the afternoon, some of those streamers really getting themselves set up and the flurries making their way to the city. But into Saturday, we should start off with quite a bit of sun, and even into the afternoon hours before the winds change, and we'll start to see some snow, light stuff, but developing Saturday night into Sunday. Overnight tonight, A risk of these flurries, -8 to -10, and then as we go through the day on Friday, we get up to about -6. The best we can do, it's still going to feel like about -15 with the wind chill. And as we head through the weekend, that cold air, it is in place. And in fact, coming into next week, we could see some accumulating snow from another storm system that's going to be moving in Monday into Tuesday, Dwight. So we'll be watching that one very carefully, too.
Well, we had some practice last week. We're ready. Thank you,
Yeah, we
Colin.
did, and really icy. I should have mentioned that, too, on the roads now, because everything we had is starting to freeze up again, right?
Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
I don't believe in it. It's just more chemicals we don't need.
I think they should put it back. Yeah. What's good for you is can't hurt you.
Windsor stopped putting fluoride in its water 6 years ago, but now there's a push to reverse that decision after serious tooth decay has soared in its population. And they're not the only city rethinking fluoride. We'll have that story for you next.
Dental decay was devastating.
Fluoridated drinking water has long been credited with lowering levels of tooth decay in children. Nearly 75% of Americans have fluoride in their tap water, but less than 40% of Canadians do. In recent years, cities across the country have been removing it from municipal water, but as Vic Adopia explains, there are signs that trend is now changing.
Your tongue out for me.
Windsor dentists have been seeing the signs for a few years now. More children with bad teeth.
More cavities at a younger age and bigger cavities at a younger age.
Bigger cavities.
So larger cavities, more advanced decay at a younger age.
Windsor stopped putting fluoride in its water 6 years ago. Public health officials say serious tooth decay has since soared by 50%. The rate of urgent dental care is now twice as high as the rest of Ontario. Yemi Kalito's two oldest kids were raised on fluoridated water and both have healthy teeth, but the two youngest weren't and had to be treated for serious tooth decay.
Same, oral hygiene, but you can see the difference between, all four of them.
Last month, City Council voted to put fluoride back into its water supply, but that hasn't ended debate in Windsor.
I don't believe in it. It's just more chemicals we don't need.
I think they should put it back. Yeah. What's good for you is can't hurt you.
A recent Canadian review of dozens of major studies concluded that water fluoridation is safe at the current recommended levels and that there are no serious health risks, and children have the most to benefit, and yet almost 2/3 of Canadians no longer have fluoride added to their municipal water. In BC, Yukon, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland and Labrador, less than 3% of the population has fluoride added to their municipal water. In Manitoba, Ontario, and the NWT, it's between 60 and 70%. Trying to add fluoride to water in Canada has been contentious from the start.
It seems almost too easy to be true.
It's been a long-standing debate everywhere.
I still believe that this is mass medication without consent.
Like Windsor, Calgary is also seeing a spike in kids' cavities after removing fluoride. Researchers say low-income families are affected most. Yet opposition to fluoride seems as strong as ever.
It's a fear of, quote, chemicals, which unfortunately have become synonymous with toxin or poison.
In Windsor, the fluoride hasn't been added back yet. The plan still has to be approved by a neighboring town council.
Mass medicating the entire water supply for the benefit of very few is not the right thing to do.
But Windsor's mayor, who opposed fluoridation, questions whether local politicians are even qualified to decide.
If there is a health benefit that's legitimate and real in fluoride in the water, it should be decided and mandated by the province of Ontario and all provinces across Canada for that matter. That's not the case. They leave the decision to people like me with no science background.
For pro-fluoride advocates, it can't be added back to the water soon enough. Vic Adopia, CBC News, Windsor, Ontario.
We actually make everything from scratch. The marinades from scratch. Our main specialty is jerk chicken.
Oh yeah, get your stomachs ready. After the break, we head to Pickering for some made-from-scratch jerk. We're just back. I'm getting hungry. We're back in 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Wayne Simpson. I'm the chef and the owner of Patois Jamaican Restaurant, and we're located in Pickering. At Patois, we actually make everything from scratch. The marinades from scratch. We get our seasonings and we blend them up because there's a flavor. We want to definitely separate ourselves from our competitors. Our main specialty is jerk chicken and jerk pork. So how we make our jerk chicken, first we marinate it. We marinate it for about a day, sometimes a little bit longer than a day. And then from there on in, we bake it, and then we put it on the grill to get the smoke flavor locked in, and then we do another layer of a sauce on top of that, right? You have the jerk chicken that's marinated from the bone to the flesh, right? And a little bit extra on top. So you have a lot of flavor.
Love that. I actually grew up with Wayne Simpson, and I had no idea that he was going to be on the show today or that he was a chef.
And he's multi-talented. Basketball.
I played basketball with him growing up. He was a great player, got a scholarship somewhere in Michigan. All right, what do we have?
It looks like a good chef, too. Well, we've got this colder air moving in, and because of that, and we had all the wet weather yesterday, it does mean we get back into this deep freeze, so we're going to find some slick sidewalks, roadways, things like this as everything is freezing back up again. Overnight tonight, -8, feeling like about -15, and tomorrow, even in the afternoon, -6, and we'll have some flurries in the city.
And some of that jerk chicken.
Oh, that would warm you right up.
We need that.
We need the samples here.
We're going to talk to Suresh about that. Yeah. Okay, we're going to talk about jerk chicken. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 6. Have a great night, everybody.